Hi everyone, I'm Greg. I'm the CISO for Expel. We're a managed detection and response company. But here today I'm here to talk to you about the business of cybersecurity. A little about me, I've been doing tech for about 30 years, about 10 in cyber. I'm a CISO twice. And so when I think about this stuff, I think about how we solve business problems with technology and cyber problems as business problems. So for years now, effectively, security leaders have been focused on ensuring that we protect the business. And it's almost been an all costs kind of thing. Security spending has grown roughly 10% year over year in most budgets. And so like a lot of point products, a lot of things that are being added, controls that are being added to address the risks. And this is natural, like there's an evolving risk landscape. There's a ton of new threats all the time. And frankly, the costs to these businesses are huge. And so there's a bit of a reckoning that's happening now because the CFO is now showing up in these conversations because you can't have a function of a business that is growing 10% year over year without yielding some sort of results. And so there's some interesting conversations that are starting to happen as boards get involved, as CFOs get involved in these conversations where they're asking, well, what am I getting for what I'm investing? For the level of investment that I'm making, what are the returns on it? And it turns out that's a very difficult question to answer. You start to have conversations about, which things make sense to run internally as part of my business, which things make sense to outsource, what point products do I need, what risks are actually addressable, and which ones should I hold my vendors accountable for addressing for me. I think these conversations are interesting because they're going to drive the future of investment in cybersecurity, both from like the venture capital side and also what technology vendors actually bring to the market. So let's talk a little bit about the challenge. When you're talking about these risks with your C-suite or your board, or really even the rest of the leadership of your company, not all of them are the same. Every C-suite's a little bit different. Every board's a little bit different, and what they care about is a little different. But there's two common themes that they all share. Generally speaking, boards care about two things. They care about the financial health of the business and what's being resourced, and they care about risk management. And so it's sort of on the CISOs and the security executives and leaders that are running this thing to explain this, to explain what their program is doing in the language that people can understand. And generally that language is finance, dollars and cents, or I guess pounds and shillings, and the risk that we have. And so there's a bit of a skill gap, I think, between how CISOs have traditionally shown up and explained this to their board and what they're expecting out of them. But with the new legislation coming, at least in the States, the SEC enforcing board oversight of cyber risk, like this is going to be a new and emerging topic. It's important to understand, it's important to communicate what happens before and after a breach and what the costs are before a breach happens and what the costs are after the breach. That's something I think most people can understand. And then sort of what is the cost of preventing a breach versus the cost of remediating a breach. And these are sort of the core of what you're trying to communicate in terms of risk. The problem and probably the biggest pitfall that I've seen people walk into is the idea that you're trying to prove a negative. Like, what is the cost of not having a breach? What is the cost of the breach that didn't happen, the regulator that didn't show up, or the amount of money that you didn't lose? Like, sure, you lose money when ransomware happens. This is a fact. But what if you prevented it? What was the value to the business of you doing that? So how do you do this? How do you have these conversations? Metrics. And so this is a common topic among boards and others, but one of the problems that CISOs have is the metrics that they use to operate their security programs don't translate into the metrics that the boards need to hear about how you're funding your program. There's a say-do gap there. You have to create the culture of metrics within your company and within your program, but like communicating those out in terms of like, hey, these are the dollar impacts to the rest of your business, much more difficult. you know, the old Peter Drucker, like what gets measured gets managed is true, but if what you're measuring isn't the right things and what you're reporting out on isn't the right things, you're not going to get funded by your board. So, you know, one of my favorite authors on this topic is Andy Grove's High Output Management. If you haven't read that, I highly recommend that book. It's often said that, you know, the only thing worse than a no measurement is a bad measurement, or a bad measurement is a no measurement. The problem is the measurement of a program, say vulnerability management or some other metric that's operational inside your program, doesn't really translate into the spend that shows up in a line item for a board. So what things do you communicate? Speed of detection, speed of remediation, and speed of response are things that are very easy to measure and to talk about. If we invest X dollars in something and we are able to make our response this much faster, this much more effective, this reduces our risk and reduces our cost by Y. That is the general theme of the conversation. We spend X money, we deliver X result, and it reduces our risk by Y amount is the theme of what you want to communicate. One way to do this is to measure things over time. So the trend lines of your metrics, like we were able to respond in 5 minutes. We made an investment. Now we can respond in 30 seconds. This reduced risk by this amount is a formula that I found worked well with boards. Another way to look at it too is are we solving a $5 problem or a 5-pound problem with a 10-pound solution? And you want to avoid the investments in security that are very expensive but don't reduce risk in a commensurate amount. And the last one that's important is to use frameworks. This is a common language for security folks, MITRE, NIST, CSF. These are ways to align your program with the activities that your program has with the investments that you're making. One of the best ways to measure your attack preparedness is to look at the attacks that are available and look at how your defenses that you've laid and the investments that you've made line up with those attacks. Probably the most important part of all of this is to be able to carry your vision of what you're doing and why you're doing it and what investments you're making and what costs you have to the board. So in closing, there's basically a few takeaways. One is make sure that you're building a culture of metrics inside your program. Like the operational metrics that you have around what vulnerabilities you have, how quickly you're remediating them, how good your incident response is, how quickly you can detect and respond to an event, and all of that are important to measure over time. How you measure against a framework, how your program is aligned to the NIST CSF or one of the other frameworks that your compliance team will drive for you. Those are important metrics. I read those out to our board. But I also read out things like velocity. It's like how quickly can we handle a problem? I think the previous speaker mentioned, like, you know, if someone can dwell in your system for 15 minutes, that's pretty much game over. So you want to make sure that your response time is less than 15 minutes. Business leaders want to know what value they're getting for the spend. It can't grow 10% year over year without some good business justification. And I think as we see more CFOs and boards showing up and asking financial questions about security programs, we're going to see this trend continue. Not every C-suite is the same. What they care about is different, and they should. The business that they're in dictates what they care about. They understand very clearly what generates revenue for their business, and you should align your program with protecting the things that generate revenue. It's not a one-size-fits-all solution. And helping your brethren in IT build their culture of metrics is also very important for you for delivering the result. And lastly, measuring your performance against standards and communicating those metrics out, probably a good thing for you to do with your board as well. That's all I had. Thank you very much. Yep.
I hope you didn't take me too literally then when I said you've got like be on time, because you went really early. So you're well in time. So we actually have some extra time for Greg, if you've got any questions.
Yes, sir. I don't actually show those kind of metrics to the board. That's for me to run my program. What I would say is we've improved our efficiency at blocking things by X, by making Y investment. So we've installed an EDR product. We've changed what EDR product that we've added in our environment. This is how much more that costs or how much less that costs. And this improved our efficiency at blocking these 400,000 events. They don't care about counting. They care about the result of, look, I made this investment and I got this outcome. Because if your breaches are 0 or rare or a few, like that's the outcome they're really thinking about. On the far right is like, did you prevent the breach? But you had to do a lot of paddling under the surface of the water for them to even make that, to get to that place. So it's about the investment against the middle tier result. But all those operational metrics, like how many vulnerabilities, how many BEC did I stop, all of that matter, of course. But they matter to you, they don't matter to them. Yes?
We often hear about conflicts on boards, because different members obviously have different objectives from focal points. How do you kind of counter those?
I think probably the best advice I could give you there is you have to get to know your board members. You have to know your audience. That's probably the single biggest piece of advice. So lots of sidebar conversations. Try to have a 10-minute meeting before the meeting with the board members and figure out like, well, this guy is interested in this and this gal is interested in that. How do I craft a message that resonates with both of them? Some will want to make more go-to-market faced investments. Some are more interested in risk reduction, probably your sales leader versus your general counsel or something. So you have to find the message that's going to land in the middle.
Any more questions for Greg? I have one then.
All right.
I'll put you on the spot.
All right,
Which is the worst mess trick you've tried to use? It didn't really go down well at all.
Oh, this is great. So the really early in my first CISO gig, I thought, all right, great. I'm going to go talk to the executive management team. I'm going to show them these metrics. And what I did was I showed them the kill chain, the Northrop Grumman kill chain of like how business email compromise works. Like here's what's going to happen. Like and if we put this control in, we got to do this. And I realized like I don't know. 40 seconds into the conversation, I'd lost the room. Like they had no idea what I was talking about. They had no idea like what any of those things were. They were like, they just turned to me and asked, well, are we safe? And I said, no, because we have to make all of these investments. And like I was pointing out all the things that we need to measure, and I just realized like, okay, I need to retool for this conversation because we're not speaking the same language.
And what do you think is the defining moment when they finally clicked, they got it, they're behind you?
When I showed them, that was an early one, so I showed them like a capability maturity model, like, hey, these are the capabilities we need. They didn't care what any of those words were. It was just that we were making progress along the goals based on, okay, we've spent some money on this and we've moved the needle in this area, and this means that we're this much safer. It was the risk reduction that they really cared about.
Do you mind me asking what sector you're in as well?
Well, currently I work for a security company, but at the time,
so they should get it then, right? You shouldn't have to tell
Well, that board was the National Hockey League, so that was in sports and entertainment, so a little different.
So you've been a CISO for quite a number of different companies, different sectors.
Yep.
How do you find they differ?
It's a little different on the vendor side. I think anyone here in the room who's a vendor will tell you that. Look, I'd say as a vendor, and you know this working at Microsoft, you're responsible for your customer security. So that feels way different when you wake up in the morning than when you're just protecting one business. We have, I think, a few hundred customers, and every morning I wake up and go like, oh, we're responsible for them too.
Any other questions for Greg? Okay, thanks, Greg.
Thank you.
Nice to see you. Take care.